Welcome to the Blue Line Project. Real talk from the front lines of American policing. We cut through the noise, challenge broken metrics, and focus on solutions that keep officers safe, communities strong, and justice real. Blue Line Strong. Here is your host, John Gabrielson.
Take it away! Nothing left but speed and power! This is more than a race!
Larson, the leader for the first time out of turn number 2. Larson now moves up and blocks the second lane, which is occupied by Tyler Reddick. Reddick still side by side with Denny Hamlin. Now here comes Hamlin looking for the lead with some assistance from Chase Briscoe.
Field flies into turns 3 and 4 for the first time, and it is Denny Hamlin who leads that field into the corner. Right behind him is Chase Briscoe. To his right elbow is Kyle Larson. Behind Denny Hamlin, it's 2 by 2 by 2 for 6 rows. Tame 2x2 racing to complete lap 1 of the Jack Links 500. Denny Hamlin squirts out in front. He leads the
Hi, welcome back to the Blue Line Project, and I'm so excited to be here. Last week, you guys saw the episode. We talked about servant leadership, and I was actually out of town for the first part of the week. Just to give you a little update, I actually went to Alabama. I was there with my wife. We went to watch NASCAR run at Talladega, and it was an amazing event. We had so much fun seeing the race and just being there. And I let in with that just so you guys could get a little taste of what I experienced and where I was at, just to, bring it together. But welcome to the Blue Line Project. As I said, I'm your host, John Gabrielson. We're back again this week. And this week, I'm really excited because we have an old friend of mine, actually really a mentor, who's become a personal friend. Chris Vallejo, Chief Chris Vallejo from Topeka, Kansas. He was a retired commander with the Austin Police Department and had a real impact on the Austin Police Department while he's there, and I'm sure he'll have an impact there in Topeka. But real world leadership isn't found in textbooks and motivation posters on a wall. It's not slogans. It's forged in the moments that no one sees coming. When the call comes in the middle of the night, when the budgets are tight, expectations are high, when public trust feels fractured, and your people are looking to you for direction. That's when leadership really kicks in. It's easy to talk about leadership. It's easy to put it on a spreadsheet or a poster board, but living it out day after day in the arena of policing is something entirely different. And in the last episode, we went deep into something that's easy to talk about, but hard to live out. And that's the idea of servant leadership. And there's so many books and videos and seminars that are put out there about servant leadership. And I unpacked what I believe are the timeless virtues that separate good leaders from great ones. And courage to do what's right. We talked about that. When it's really unpopular, oftentimes leaders, they have to walk alone. And honestly, that builds an unbreakable trust with their people when they know that the leader has their back. Charity is truly putting people's ideas and thoughts and well-being first. Justice that's fair but firm, being prudent in our decision making, that hard-earned wisdom to make decisions that last. We talked about the best leaders don't just command, they serve. They lead people and they manage things. They lift up the men and women they lead and communicate that they protect and care about you. They tell stories that remind everyone why we wear the uniform in the first place. And Chris will say, and you'll see coming up, we'll probably talk about the why of policing, why we do this, and that'll be something in our conversation. But we have to measure success not by personal power, but by the safety and dignity that people place in us and that we help create within the environments in which we work. We want to move leadership from leadership theory. It's not just theory, right? We want to have standards that we hold ourselves to in this profession. We want to call ourselves professionals, so therefore we have to hold ourselves to a professional standard, just like every other profession does. And we're doing a much better job of that today here in the 21st century in 2026 than we were in previous decades. Because out here on the blue line, leadership isn't abstract. It's a difference between a department that just responds to calls and one that actually solves problems. And there's a huge difference. It's the difference between officers who feel like numbers on a roster and officers who feel seen, supported, and are part of something bigger. It's the difference between communities that fear the police and communities that see us as partners. And one of the things that we have to remember is sometimes the communities fear the police more than they fear the criminals. And that's a horrible commentary on what we've done in policing over the years to lead to that kind of mentality and thought. I've seen it in my own conversations across the country and across Texas. Leaders who embody these virtues don't wait for perfect conditions. They act with courage when politics may be pushing them in a different way. And we talked a lot about that last week, that we cannot be in the world of politics. And Sir Robert Peel reminds us of that we're not to operate at the whim of political powers, but that we're to walk courageously and to carry out true leadership that's best for the people and best for our agency and best for the community. A good leader chooses honesty even when the numbers are uncomfortable. Even when they have to go out and tell an uncomfortable truth, they're willing to do it. They practice charity by investing in their people's lives and wellness and growth. And we're going to talk about that with Chief Vallejo and how he's done it for his command staff and how he did it for me personally and others at the Austin Police Department. Leaders deliver justice without favoritism, and they exercise prudence by leaning on data. They also lean on history. They learn from their lived experiences and a body of work that other people have, and they rely on the experiences of men and women from the street themselves and listen to their line officers and their sergeants. And we're going to talk a little bit about in the interview today about what role the sergeant plays and how important they are within any organization. And here's what I love about all of this. These virtues aren't soft. They're strategic. We're going to talk about strategic leadership and what that actually means. Courage drives innovation. And we're going to see that in this interview as we talk with Chris. I'm going to ask him about the courage that it took, not only APD, but in Topeka to bring these principles like the harm-focused policing that we've talked about in previous episodes known as HYPE. We've talked about problem-oriented policing. We're going to talk about that in the real world as it's being lived out by Chief Vallejo. Honesty builds credibility and can survive any scandal. Charity creates loyalty that turns officers into great ones. And justice absolutely earns the respect that every leader needs to be a successful leader. Prudence turns short-term visions into lasting safety. And that's something that you're going to see in the interview with Chief Vallejo is how he takes a long-term vision. He's a futurist. He's forward-thinking in how he approaches this job and where he's going to lead that agency, whether it's the Austin Police Department or Topeka or wherever you're working. What is your future? What are you thinking about looking to the forward, looking forward into the future? What is your 5-year plan and where is your department going to be? And at any level, where are you going to be as an officer, as a supervisor, whether you're a sergeant, lieutenant, captain, commander, all the way up to the chief itself. Like I said, today, our guest is going to be Chief Chris Vallejo with the Topeka Police Department. What stands out to me is what he's doing, right? He's getting officers out of their cars. He's getting them to start real conversations. He's putting the supervisors back in ability to be able to supervise. And he, as he says in his words, he's going to say, let cops be cops. Let supervisors be supervisors. He's just giving a framework. We're going to share stories. We're going to talk about his journey, things that inspired me, connections that he's made. We're going to talk about measuring success. We're going to talk about being transparent, building trust instead of hiding behind it. You see, servant leadership in the real world is courageous enough to recognize innovation, honest enough to publish the good, the challenging numbers, charitable enough to invest in community partnerships and officer wellness, and just enough to focus resources where they are needed the most. You see, prudence in leadership is important because it builds for the long term, for the long haul, using evidence and community input. And one of the things that we have so often failed to do in police departments is get community input. In the 90s, we're going to talk about this in the interview, police departments did an amazing job of getting criminals off the street and violent crime, right? But at the end of the day, what did they sacrifice with the overhanded and the top-heavy enforcement and things like that? What did that actually result? We'll talk about that with Chief Vallejo. But policing, honestly, it turns virtues into results on the street. Again, we tell stories. We teach how people how to serve. We serve the community, and it brings back pride, trust, and effectiveness into departments everywhere. Today is Chief Chris Vallejo of Topeka Police Department. He's a Marine veteran, over 30 years in law enforcement. Chief Vallejo rose through the ranks in Austin, Texas, leading everything from the Special Victims Investigation to running the training academy and recruiting that produced the department's most diverse cadet class. He also pioneered Austin's first chief data officer role to fuse data with real community trust. In January of 2025, he took the helm in Topeka after a nationwide search. Since then, he has launched the PACT initiative, Policing Community Together, focused on reducing violent crime, increasing transparency, and getting officers back to the basics of connection. And it's an interesting to me that I've already looked at some of the stats, and crime is already dropping by about 10% compared to a 5-year average. So he's already having success. Chief, welcome to the Blue Line Project. It's great to have you here.
John, it's great to see you again. Great to be here with all of you.
Awesome. Yes. Well, thank you for being on the show. And, you stepped into Topeka after a nationwide search that included, community input, public meet and greets. What was it? What was the moment like when the offer actually came in, and how did you approach those early weeks of building, restructuring command staff, trying to optimize patrols, and just kind of setting those short, mid, and long-term goals? What did that look like for you?
Well, the offer was surreal because it's something that I felt I could do throughout my career. You and I worked for many years together, and I felt that the wonderful things that we did together in Austin and the way we approached things was scalable up to the chief level. So I'm grateful for the community of Topeka community and the city to give me that opportunity, and I think it's been paying off on both ends. So I I, I when I got here, I committed to being a listener mostly. There were three things: observing, listening, and learning. Even though I had 30 years in the Austin Police Department, that didn't necessarily equate to credibility here. Take this stranger from a large municipal agency coming into the Midwest, who they've never really heard of or seen before, and I'm going to tell them how to police. So yeah. So you come in as the boss, but you're actually the new kid. You're actually the new kid when you get here. So you gotta, in order for me to not walk by myself, and actually people follow, I have to spend quite a bit of time observing, listening, and learning. That's a lot of emotional labor that takes place doing that. Getting the community to know you, getting the officers to know you, the professional staff to know you and what you're about. So that I would say that took about, oh gosh, if you're running and gunning in a new chief's position, 50, 60, sometimes 70 hours a week, being everywhere all the time, especially the first year, and finding out what it is. I have my ideas of what a good policing is, but we have fantastic people here, Topeka police officers and senior command, that also have fantastic ideas. And when I got to know these folks, I found out that we had a lot of the same ideas. They just needed to be empowered to carry those out. So that's what the first year of being a new chief looks like, and now we're in a position to carry out a lot of the strategies that we co-produce together, not only with the senior command staff, all my assistant chiefs and commanders, but also with the community as well. They have a lot of things going on within this community that work well in our space, and tying all those together is what makes a good first year, a good chief, or a good start. You talked about the crime here in Topeka dropping last year in 2025. We might get into this, but I also took a 5-year approach looking at crime, not just the 2025 compared to 2024, but the last 5 years, and kind of compared the averages, compared statistically whether actually crime is down in Topeka, and it is for those of you that want to look at the annual report. I put it online on LinkedIn. Go to our City of Topeka website, and you can pull it up there. It's a comprehensive annual report that shows not only the crime stats, but also, if you didn't know anything about the Topeka Police Department, you could go on to that, open that annual report and learn all about your police department, and what each individual bureau, all the way down to the unit level, does. So that's what something I'm proud of, because it's a product of that observing, listening, learning, back to your original question. And I think 2026 is going to prove even better.
Yeah. And we'll put a link to that in the show so that the folks can look at that. I mean that's a lot. I know that you came in with a lot of ideas that you took and building that, building that trust really at the end of the day. I mean, it's really, really hard. I know in our last episode, we talked about, my audience about exploring like core values of virtue. Like we talked about courage because a lot of times leaders have to walk alone, right? Being honest and even having charitable attributes, being just, prudence, and things like that. You talked about those things. How do those things you think play out in your first year there? Um, Taking that approach that you took, what what impacted command staff the most? How did you see the change kind of take place? I guess is what I'm asking, based on these different values that you brought that they might not have seen in leaders prior.
I think I brought out, I, I've always prided myself as not being the smartest person at the table because then I'm limited by my own ideas and thought. So, getting to know my staff here, they're absolutely brilliant in the things that they think about. They just needed to be empowered. So, bringing those ideas I had and listening to the ideas they had, like I mentioned earlier, they kind of meshed. So now they needed someone to empower them to carry those through. They needed I guess to put forth a vision of what policing looks like. And I'm what you call a futures thinker. I'm always looking several years down the road at what policing, not just what is, but what policing will be. A good chief executive is always looking several years down the road. We tend to kind of look at year by budget, and what's in front of us right now. But you got to, for policing right now, especially as how fast it's evolving in the 21st century, you need to already be thinking several years down the road for everything you're doing, and not just change for change's sake, but that's just what society is changing at that pace. So policing should keep up with it, especially with the expectations of us.
Absolutely. And what something you taught me that always stuck out. I remember we were in your office and you wrote on your board that you lead people and you manage things. And I think
Mhm.
that's really the mark of a good leader is leading people. And can you just describe when you make that, well, what do you mean by when you say lead people? I know what you mean, but maybe the audience doesn't know when you're leading people versus managing them and how that translates into building that camaraderie and trust.
Well, you have different trains of thoughts, where we talk about leadership versus effective management. Everything's all leadership. There's a blend. I'm one that tends to find the balance in everything that I do. There is a form of management that you have to do. There are things that need to be managed, but not people. People hate to be managed. They want to be led. So that goes back to the lead people manage the stuff, the things. A lot of times good managers, good leaders, whatever you want to call them, they focus on managing people, and people don't like to fit into that management category because it's natural to manage stuff, things, operations, administrative stuff, policies. But people, they want a human aspect. They want to come to work with understanding. They want purpose in what their lives with, and you have to give them that, and you have to lead them by example, and exude that vision and that purpose, whatever it is that you're trying to do in your agency. People want to be uh, assured that someone at the helm is thinking forward and giving them a purpose for what it is they do. It's hard to do that if you're just managing stuff. That's important. Good management for stuff. Good leadership for people.
Yes. And then how does that challenge, like when you do that, like just in your experience, what outcomes have you seen? You've taken that approach of transparency, accountability, and leading the folks. Just give us one thing that you've actually, a challenge that you overcame because of that philosophy that you faced there in your first year in Topeka.
I think there was a few challenges that I encountered. I think the main one was probably me. Not that I did anything, but I'm just a new person from an external, I should say. They've had a history of internal police chiefs here, and you get to know your chief. You know where they come from. You were probably patrolling with them. So a person that they've never seen or heard of before, uh, trying to overcome the what is this person going to do. I'm sure you can Google a little bit about Chris Vallejo's on the website, but it doesn't really tell you who that person is, or the really what is. what is Chris like behind the scenes? I got the resume and everything that you read, but is he really what he purports to be? So, that emotional labor that I talked to, but also overcoming some internal barriers. There was some stagnation here. Where over the past several years, I'm not blaming anyone, but there was just not a lot of movement forward. But we had a lot of capable senior command staff, and we
Mhm.
still do, that wanted to move that needle forward. So it's just a combination of, will this new chief be able to move us forward? That's what they hired me for, because as an external coming in and giving a
Mhm.
separate set of eyes, and will he allow us to be part of that? Traditionally, at some points, maybe it was a little top heavy in some decision making without actually using your bureau commanders and things effectively. So I'm all about sharing that,
Mhm.
letting commanders be commanders and letting cops be cops, letting sergeants be sergeants. So as we go on, and they get to know me, they've figured out that I'm actually for real.
Yeah, I remember when you first became our commander, there in Austin, and we had our first meeting, and MetroTech was there, and I remember you walked in with your stack of papers to introduce us to Panda and reducing crime and, you know, Jerry Ratcliffe's work, and you were for real, and you actually made it happen. And I know that in Austin, that at times rubbed people the wrong way because people don't like change, you know? So I'm happy for you because you're in a new environment and you'll be able to bring that emphasis. And with that, you are bringing the emphasis on problem-oriented policing, bringing in and really utilizing like Sarah and Panda. Um, Walk us through how you introduce this to the department, and that shift in mindset. I mean, how did you introduce it? Because it's just a huge change for traditional folks and traditional policing.
Well, when I know what works, I tend to not only use it, but I tend to, I'll put it this way. I did it the same way I did when I was working in Austin, when I was a commander over at Northwest Austin and had new lieutenants. I said, if you want to understand how I think, and if you want to continue working for me, these are the books that you will read. I will buy them, and you will buy into them. And that's how if you don't, and what was also a tactic, if you don't read and understand how to reduce crime the best effective way, you're not going to understand what your subordinates are coming to you with, because I made sure to understand that our community officers, our district representatives understood that. So if your people underneath you are going to change and understand new crime theories and such, it would behoove you to be able to keep up with them, because they're going to surpass you if not. So same thing here, a little bit more subtle. As a new chief, I just said, "Hey, this is, if you want to understand the things I think, the way I talk, and how I see things, it's because of people that were far smarter than me in this realm. And this is how I got to where I got. So these are the books that you'll read if you want to be my commander, lieutenant, assistant chief. You'll read them and understand, and I'll be able to tell if you are projecting those by the language that you use. So it's been effective here. I think it's also refreshing, because this is information that they had previously kind of knew about, but they never could put a name to. Like, cops know about crime concentration. Cops know
Yes.
where the problem spots. It's just putting names to it and putting some theory behind it, and putting some things that they've never, in a way that they never looked at. We know this intuitively. It's just putting the research in front of you. I talk a lot about the profession. If we want to be the law enforcement profession, then we have to treat it like a profession. And part of that is reading that body of knowledge, of information that's coming out at a rapid rate, of how or what is effective in policing, especially when it comes to crime reduction, when it comes to community engagement. I'm not above also going to other fields out there, from School of Social Work or psychology and things like that. We're a people-oriented organization, so we deal a lot. Yeah, we deal with taking some calls for service, but mostly it's dealing with folks and dealing with communities. A lot of what we deal with the communities, not even, won't have, most of the time, you won't go away writing a report. You're going to solve a problem, or you're going to solve an issue, or mediate something, and just as much internally. I tell you, if you talk to a police officer, any police officer, and they tell me about the biggest stressors you have in policing, they're not going to talk about when they were working the night shift in the problem part of town. They're going to talk about command staff, or organizational stuff, or transfers, promotions. So you have to learn people. So anything that deals with people, and then of course the things we do out in the community, crime, things that don't have anything to do with crime, mental health, um, uh, drug addiction, homelessness, and how they all blend together. That's a big dynamic for police officers to understand. But there's research out there for everyone, including chiefs and command staff, to read on how better to approach these things. And there's a lot of research on how better to approach organizational development, organizational issues as well.
Yeah, it's about doing your research. I know that you did that, and I read Reducing Crime, and I read the books that you've put out there and started implementing them at the officer level. And I found that I was actually beginning to influence upper above me. I was beginning to influence lieutenants and sergeants. And they were starting to see the vision. And I remember when you came in and we did a gun crime initiative, and your first statement was, "We're not going to make any arrests. We're going to focus on these hot spots here in Adams sector because the guns are ending up in Edwards sector, and so we're going to reduce." And we started doing it, and the getting the patrol to buy in to do the code 2 patrols. Frank and I went out and started doing the educational side of it, meeting with people, and it was amazing how you took patrol with us in the community engagement effort, combine that with what Metro TAC was doing over on the east side, and next thing unfortunately COVID kind of stopped us mid, but we were seeing those reductions, and we were and the thefts and things from the motor vehicles were stopping because we were educating people how to secure their weapons and getting people to let them bring them in. It was really an amazing thing, and it changed my world. Chief, I just wanted you to know that, like, when I saw those things actually working, I realized it was a whole new approach. So thinking of that, you put together your pack, or your police and community together. When we talked about it before, I understood it was kind of like a hybrid between Metro TAC and what I would know as Metro TAC here in Austin, like a street level narcotic tactical unit with your community engagement crime prevention unit. Um, Tell me how you put that together, and the community stories and things, and anything that's coming out of that, and how the officers took that, because that's a really cool concept of how you're implementing problem oriented policing through this new team.
Absolutely. Yeah, I knew we had an issue here with violent crime, but like any city, Austin or Topeka or any city, it's not. They aren't dangerous cities. They're just pockets where people feel unsafe. So crime's concentrated. So we knew that we had to focus on the key issue, the key problems, the key areas within the city of Topeka. But also, I didn't want to. I talk a lot about. I've been in this game almost 32 years, and I learned a lot from the 1990s of what not to do. And one, back
Right.
then, we were focused on violent crime, and we were very effective. But I we carpet bombed an entire part of town with arrests and stops of anyone and everyone, kind of zero tolerance and stuff. That didn't work. And what I didn't realize as a young officer growing up, all the work which was incentivized. The more arrests we did, the more kudos we got. The more we did that, the more mistrust we garnered from the community, because we really didn't ask them what we thought they needed. We just kind of conducted the operations and the crime reduction the way we thought they needed. So that had a negative effect, and I learned that as I got older. Yeah, you might want to ask some folks if you're in the community if they feel safe, or sometimes they don't feel safe from you, the police. So knowing that coming forward in Topeka, I did a lot of talking to the community, and they were for great policing, even in neighborhoods where maybe a little bit higher crime or more criminogenic, or folks may not necessarily have the best trusting relationship with the police. They don't necessarily want to defund anything or not have police. They just want good, fair policing. So, taking that in mind when you're building a violent crime unit, you take those into account. Even went down to the way we rolled it out, and to the name, the pact. The police and community together is the way we marketed it. And before day one that the pact went live, I had a personal communication with each one in a group meeting. I said, "Now is the time, my new pact members. If you don't align with my philosophy, tell me now." Pause for effect. And then I take it that we're all aligned with my new philosophy on police and community together. What that looks like for this team, they're not exactly DRs or what we call CPOs here, community police officers. They're to that level, but I want them to be trusted and be able to be approachable from the community and get what we call the human intelligence or intelligence-led policing aspect of it down. I don't want neighborhoods to cower or be afraid when the PAC team shows up, because that's contrary to what we're trying to do. So, so the SOPs and everything's written around the PAC concept, working together, being data driven and being intelligence led. Some of the aspects of the height model that you talk about and that Jerry Radcliffe brilliantly designed. Those are thrown in there, at least the concepts of it, and they have the reducing crime and other concepts too, of just kind of put it all together. So in other words, from the beginning, defining that mission of that violent crime team, or redefining it, or just, wherever you are in the world, whatever kind of team, if it's something that everybody is scared of, including the good guys and the good people, then you might want to redefine the mission of what they do. So PACT, it's designed to be police and community together. And that usually looks like getting people to trust you, to give you the intelligence. And I'll use examples of intelligence. When the PAC team first started, we were able to find a homicide a person that absconded on a warrant for over 2 years through people trusting enough to communicate in different formats with our PAC team. They were able to find that person and arrest them and bring them to justice. So that's the kind of information that if your community trusts you, they'll give you that information. Otherwise, you're never going to get that information yourself. You're only going to get a small piece of the puzzle. So that human intelligence is everything.
Human intelligence is everything. I mean, even though, in our district representative, which would be equivalent to like a community policing crime prevention unit, we're not doing, street level narcotics type stuff or, things like that. But I will say we've come across and gotten cooperation from the community, and we've actually helped auto theft unit. I think when you were there, we ended up catching David Haber. And, we got it off a community tip because we had great relationships with apartment managers. And turns out he was not only a package thief, but he was also a motorcycle thief. And hundreds of cases were cleared. And at the time, Sergeant Jusilo was like, "Hey, great work." And the people were like starting to talk like, "Wow, how is the community engagement team getting all this intel that's passing to other detective units? Where's it coming from?" And it was based on what you were saying. We were building that trust within the community, chief, and then people just started talking to us because we were approachable and they knew that they would have our ear. So I love what you're doing. It's amazing. I wish we had something more similar to that here in Austin. Maybe we can look to that and maybe do something here in my last couple of years with the Austin Police Department. But I've been watching you and following you up there in Topeka, and some of your recent updates, you've been highlighting the 80-20 rule, which I'm very familiar with. But you pointed out that roughly 20% of all offenders, right, are driving about 80% of your crime. You're applying this place-based and network-focused strategy, because we know crime concentrates. So, are you using a Panda model, or what patterns are you using? And just kind of explain how you're fitting that in, because I'm very familiar with Hype and Panda. How are you actually addressing those hot spots, those crime concentrations that we know that have been traditionally there probably for 10, 15, 20 years, and now you're finally addressing them? What's that looking like, and are you seeing disruptions in those patterns of the criminals operating in those areas?
Yeah, I tend, and I think a good chief or just a good thinker, police officer in general, should think in terms of systems and how they work together. So, when I was a young lad in policing, we kind of worked in isolation. We went out there and patrolled, and we kind of looked for what we thought was the bad guy, and we would get a lot of them, but we kind of get them in isolation. Maybe take some crack off the street, or maybe take a gun off the street. High five, and then go on to the next one and see what else we could find. But we weren't really really working on a strategy. So then that's just why I'd shout out to Dr. Tamara Harold for the Place Network investigation strategy that focuses on networks, and focuses on areas that tend to be criminogenic, and the things, not just the connecting places with the people that drive drive that crime. I use the 80/20 roughly as just a kind of a context. I know there'll be statisticians here that are going to, well, that's not 80/20. I get it. It's just an example of just kind of driving home the point that a few of the bad guys in your area tend to do a lot of the crap, a lot of the stuff. So that's what I'm getting at. It's a point.
Yeah.
So that's it's true here. The one thing we did, we did a little bit of pre and post analysis on the PAC team, and a few months, 6 months before and 6 months after implementation, which is not it's a rough estimate, but shots fired calls went down 50% within the city, and I know that's because of the strategies that they're using. I mean, I could use I definitely could use a data analyst here to help me with that. But my request for them was focused. Use the 80/20 as just a concept in your mind to go after in the old days we call them top offenders, or the repeat offenders, or the guys that are always out there conducting the ones that are always giving you problems. Focus on them. So even in any city where you have people carrying guns, I would say a small percentage of them are going to be your problem shooters all the time. They're always popping off guns everywhere. So focus on them. And we have put a lot of those guys in jail, and a lot of those statistics are going down. So I think we're on the right track. So right now we're in the midst of developing a violent crime strategy for the next 3 years that'll be a little bit more measured and focused, and be able to back up a little bit more statistically with what I'm saying. So that's part of me, of course, looking ahead several years down the road to be able to prove our work.
It's all about being able to prove your work. One of the knocks on crime prevention for so many years was, how do you qualify or quantify that which you're stopping before it happens, which is why we're using terms like crime reduction. It's interesting, the 80/20 rule. I've also seen other things that I've read where 1 to 3% of the population are your repeat offenders that have high recidivism rates in and out of jail. The funny thing is, Chief, when you take them off the street, crime goes down. It's really crazy how that works. Like, it doesn't take rocket science to figure it out, right? And then when you actually disrupt it, and I remember listening to Dr. Harold, and she's coming on the show in a couple weeks, but when she gave a presentation, I had listened to a 5-hour class and have gotten to know her. And we used at Mitchell Lobos there over off of Breaker Lane, if you're familiar with that, we use this place network approach to attack that problem. And it's amazing. Like, our calls for service have gone down. All the things are going down. And because we took a long-term strategy approach, and I love seeing that you're doing it. And I love the fact that here in another city in the United States that they're buying into this, because you're going to see reductions in crime. It just has to happen. And you said something else that I think police departments are really famous for, is the quick wins. And getting your guys out of that mindset, right? Going out, making those quick arrests, patting ourselves on the back. How are your ground level troops? How are the officers taking to this different approach? Because you're not always looking to arrest, right? We're looking to build trust within the community. We're taking different types of approaches and strategies. How's that filtering down, not only from your command staff, but to your actual ground troops, those officers on the street? What's the feedback you're getting from them as you're kind of changing this philosophy?
I think if you're talking about the patrol level, morale's, from what I get from my staff, it's never been higher. Like I started out, I am letting cops be cops, but I'm just giving them the guidance that they need. I don't mind if they go out there and make quality arrests when people are out there harming other people. That's I'm just saying that it doesn't have to be the primary focus to make me happy. Just having prevention and having no crime and having a quiet night. Every day I get from every shift, first, second, and third shift here, which would be days, nights, and evenings. Back in Austin, I get a report like what happened that shift. And my most favorite thing is no significant items to report. So that means it was quiet. I'm good with that too. If we have a quiet night, effective patrols, and effective the PACs doing what they should be doing, and patrols focusing on those key areas that they know about, they know where their crime is, and we give them the information that they need. And I'm happy. Quality arrest, but also with from the community standpoint, is the community is not the enemy. There are people out there that may harm the community, but as you make these arrests, always understand your first and primary goal is you work for the community. So.
Absolutely. It's people want a voice, they want to be heard. And that's one of the things that I've always appreciated about you and the philosophy that you drilled into those of us that got the privilege to work for you. I know when I first became a DR, I was introduced to the evidence-based, data-driven strategies, and they were, whether they people back here in Austin, they were a hallmark of your work here in Austin, Texas, especially when you pioneered that chief data role, and now I wish you could see it, Chief. We really are under our Chief Davis. We're really becoming more data-driven than I've ever seen in the history of Austin, Texas, and I've been a cop here for 22 years. And so I think, believe it or not, I want to give you encouragement. I think a lot of the things that you said, I've heard people say, "Hey, man, Chris Vallejo, he actually knew what he was talking about. Like, man, why didn't we listen?" I've heard this, so I just want you to know that you did lay a groundwork here in Austin, and I see the change. And thank you to Chief Davis and her vision and taking us in that, which leads me to this. You're getting this buy-in. How are you going to institutionalize that? What does that actually look like? Because we want to move evidence-based, data-driven, crime reduction, harm-focused, intelligent-led. We're using hype. We want to move from buzzwords, right, to sustained culture. How do you do that, you believe, and how are you doing that in Topeka? And how can other chiefs or other people that are listening kind of get an idea of how to institutionalize this to move beyond, a catchphrase or a buzzword?
Well, first, hats off to Chief Davis. Even though I'm no longer at APD, I'm born and raised in Austin. My family's there. I still have people I love at the department, and I know the wonderful things they're doing there with. And she's got a definitely good lineup of people that she has coming in and consulting her. Man, she's doing it right. Hats off to Lisa, to Chief Davis, and hats off to the APD folks for carrying through on that. So I think kind of like Chief Davis, and what I'm trying to do here, you talked a little bit about institutionalizing that. Some of these things are written in my policies, in my SOPs, for the use the PAC team. We talk about being evidence-based, data-driven, and some of those concepts in their standard operating procedures. So long after I'm gone, the words and the concepts are still there. And how do other chiefs and executives do it? One, you got to learn what it is. So there's plenty of information. Like I talked about, a body of knowledge. There's all kinds of stuff. If anybody is hooked into the National Policing Institute, the IACP, PERF, there is stuff everywhere to read. And if you can't read it yourself as a police chief, you probably have someone in the agency that has more than the capability and would love to learn that. All I did at APD is I didn't, I think the first mistake I did was trying to, as a young lieutenant commander, trying to influence the entire department. But I shifted my focus towards the end to the key players and people that I would leave behind that would make changes, like yourself and other key folks that would live that on, because I know someday they would move on to be promoted or more influential in what they're doing. So just go with the key players. That 20% of those cops that are gonna someday produce 80% of the success or results in your department. So focus on them and bring them along. As a police chief now, I just try to be the example, not only here, but wherever I'm asked to go or speak. I talk about these things, but there are far greater people than myself. I'm part of the National Institute of Justice Lead Scholar Program. And there are so many wonderful people through that program that have gone on to be police chiefs and commanders and run agencies and stuff like that can run circles around anything I've ever done. But like I said, I never want to be the smartest person at the table. I'm glad there's people smarter than me because I rely on them. I read their research. I see what they're doing in their agencies, and they're the ones that are making that happen. I think it takes a small movement, and that movement is in effect. I think back when 2017, when I was first introduced to evidence-based policing by Dr. Renee Mitchell. That was something that I kind of knew a little bit about the concepts of it, but it's never put in a format where I understood through her teaching and working with the Austin Police Department, coming and giving those teaching courses to command staff. And during the early days, I think it's a great example of how we've evolved. And I'm glad to see the Austin Police Department evolving and moving in that direction, and that there are people there that can sustain it. And that's all I'm trying to do here, is build that where it's sustainable. We have some fantastic people that will be able to carry out that type of evidence-based thinking long after I'm gone.
Well, I mean, that's the key. As a good leader, everything that I've learned about leadership, Chief, is a good leader. Their legacy isn't so much remembering them; it's changing the department for the good, so that when they walk away, whether they're long forgotten, the changes actually sustain and carry on. And even in my role here at Austin, I made a career decision to stay at a lower level and not promote. However, even things that I have done at my low level are now beginning to have impact at the higher level. And I'm seeing it play out. And so I know when I'm gone, just like when you're gone, that those things will come back, and that's awesome. I also know that you encourage officers to get out of their cars and have real conversations. That human connection, you've been talking about that a lot. Why do you think, and this is just kind of your opinion, but why do you think it is so powerful when we take that human connection, the officers connecting, and then attaching it to our problem-oriented strategies that are clearly being based on the evidence that we see and the body of knowledge that's outside of us? Why do you think that is so powerful? Is it just that it makes us real? I mean, it really is changing the world, and it's a huge change even from when I started in '04 to today. Just what's your opinion on that? What is it that makes it so powerful, this human connection and connecting it to the problems we're addressing?
People are social creatures, man. I'll tell you that to they want connection. I think even police officers, even the hardest ones, they connect somewhere in their lives. So it's like I started out, we're a people driven business. So often, we're in our vehicles, we're driving around, we're taking calls, and I understand that we have that issue here with call load and getting to the next call, but I'm making it okay. Like if you could spend a few minutes just after you clear the call, just sitting there and asking a few questions. It can be about anything, about the neighborhood, the weather. I don't care. Just people very rarely do people interact with a police officer outside of when they call them. So just to spend a few minutes and just talking about whatever, the ball game on Sunday night, or just the weather or something. Yeah, I just, can I measure those results? No, but I don't need to measure those. I get calls from people all the time when that does happen. Thank you for Officer so and so. He stopped and he just talked to me about this, and he's a wonderful guy. We find out that his kids and mine go to the same school. So those kinds of things, those people are just craving for connection in this move it technology world, and policing's no different. And I think it puts police officers in a different light. It's very easy to kind of see police as distant or not human when you're wearing all this stuff. And it's very easy for police officers to forget that there's a power imbalance every time we go out there dressed in their uniforms, even in the nicest of days, if we're just walking around or going into a convenience store and to grab a drink and say hello, there's still that power imbalance, right? Because not every day people talk to uniformed police officers. So it's important for our police officers to make those connections, even in the smallest way, because people will remember that you had that conversation with them, and they'll carry that with them, wherever they go. So it's important, especially when we're doing it intentionally in the form of crime reduction. We really need to get the buy-in and the understanding. I tell the community, I tell my police officers and command staff, nothing, just about anything we do, it's not secret. This isn't the Secret Service or the FBI or some
Right.
some espionage or the CIA. A lot of the stuff is community policing. So most of what we do, we go out there. So if we're policing in an think P&I, if we're policing in a neighborhood, why not bring that neighborhood in and let them know how we plan to do it and get some suggestions and feedback instead of keeping it close to the vest. There's things that a lot of stuff we can do. We can do and collaborate with the community. We don't have to hold it so tight, and a lot of that's through talking to people.
Absolutely. Like, I feel like sometimes I was just teaching a class in San Marcos, and I had a group of 14 officers, and we were talking about community engagement. And I said, guys, there's nothing we do that I call super secret squirrel.
Mhm.
Like you said, we're not in some clandestine agency. Like, most of the information we have is forward facing. So if someone asks why you're there, and maybe they're a neighbor, rather than give him the hand and say, hey, talk to the hand. Hey, yeah, we're here for this. You should know what's protected by CJIS and what's not, what you can't give out, what you can't. So talk to people. You're so right. When you just get out and talk and connect, people just they feel like they're part of you. And it brings the community together. And I've seen that personally played out. And so I agree with you on that. I think people are social creatures, and we have to understand that. And when you get out of that car and take that 5 minutes and then you connect, I've had so many people say, John, you're so cool. You're different than other police officers. It's not that I'm different than any other police officer. They're all exactly like me. It's just I took the time to actually talk to you. And so now you experienced a human
Mhm.
connection. We and even and unfortunately, we're coming in the Memorial Month here in the May. Even when officers fall, all of a sudden, we humanize them. But why are we humanizing when we're burying them when we should be humanizing us while we're wearing the badge and still alive? And that's getting out of that car. So I agree with it. I love what you're doing. And just kind of rewind things down here. What would be your advice for like mid-level supervisors, at the sergeant level when we're talking about being prudent and just and implementing some of these things? What are some of the pitfalls and traps that a mid-level supervisor could fall into? And what would be your advice for them? We've kind of talked about the bottom, we talked about the top. Let's talk about that kind of sergeant level. What's your
Mhm.
advice for those guys?
Well, I will concede to every sergeant that's listening, and who in the agency is the most powerful supervisor. And it doesn't matter if you have 4 stars or 10 stars or whatever on your collar. It's always going to be the sergeant that's the most influential, powerful supervisor in the agency, because that's probably, I hate to say this as a chief, that was probably my most favorite ever growth spot as a sergeant, because I was closest to the problem, I was closest to the troops, and I had the most influence over their lives. So you hold everything. If you want to be an effective chief, you have to get your frontline supervisors to buy into what you say, because they will beat up everything you do if they don't buy into what you're doing and you're walking along. So my word to the frontline supervisor is you are that pivot point in an organization that makes it succeed or fail. And the pitfalls is one, not understanding your profession. I think at any level, that's why I educated our DRs, our community officers back in Austin and here. Um, I remember telling y'all, you can understand and know just as much information as any commander, any chief, if you study it and you self-direct your education and understand policing going forward. That's why I kudos to you for the success you're having with the Crime Reduction Institute. I think that's a product of your learning and reaching out there beyond what was taught to you in the academy. For sergeants, you have to understand your profession and don't see yourself as just a sergeant. You are currently the pivot point, and someday, depending on where you're going to go, you're the future of this profession. So start now. There has never been a better time to be a police officer in accessing knowledge, accessing research, accessing mentors. There's podcasts. You can get on here and see any number of podcasts like yourself and others, and the books that are putting out there, the free webinars. There is no excuse not to advance your knowledge and be the best supervisor you can be to move an organization forward, because the sergeants at that level are the ones that are actually doing the work to move it forward. So don't cut yourself short, and build yourself to be a better sergeant using the stuff that's available, the information that's available in your profession to be a professional. Mhm.
Man, that's powerful. I agree with you. And in closing, my final question is, I know we have folks that listen. We're a growing podcast. We started with nothing and now we're growing. And I know people listen and watch and they're aspiring leaders. And you've talked a lot about what they need to do to be problem oriented, and living out servant leadership and the values and virtues that we talked about the last 2 weeks. What would be the first practical step that you would recommend that someone would take this week to begin to start the journey that you and I have been on? Just give them that one first step this week that you think will launch that journey for them as we close out this time together.
Reinvigorate and pull out and dust off your why. Why are we in this profession? It depends, of course, on the level of leadership where you're at. But there's a reason that I focus also with police officers and at that line level to understand where policing is going, because they're the ones that are going to be here in another 10, 15, 20 years. So as wherever you are, officer, detective, sergeant, lieutenant, commander, wherever it is, why are you still there? Sometimes we forget our why. That's why I'm back in uniform after a 30-year stint down in Austin, because I asked myself my why, and I said, I have more to give, and I have a mission and a purpose that's higher than myself. So now, as a second career in this career, wherever this takes me, my why is to leave policing better than when I found it. And God chose Topeka for me to do that. So start with that, start with your why, build on that, and then start leading. And even at the officer level, start leading people to in the next generation to their whys as well. Start spreading that, spread the love out, and let's move this profession forward, one person at a time. Do it together.
Oh, amen. It is finding your why. It's why I do it. And man, Chief, it was so good to see you and have you on the show. And just hope to do this again. And Kansas is a place I don't get up to, but I was just telling the wife that, hey, we should go up to Topeka because I'd love to just sit down and break bread with you once again and just catch up. Are there any final thoughts that you had as we close? I appreciate you and thank you for coming on to the show today. I really appreciate it.
Hey, John, it's an honor to touch base again, and you're definitely welcome anytime up to the Midwest. And I just hope this has some kind of impact. I hope it creates some kind of discussion channel underneath wherever you post this. And I love the idea of moving this department forward, and I look forward to other guests that come on your show in the future I'll be watching and understanding. I'm a perpetual student of leadership and policing. I always will be until the day I can't do it anymore. Thank you for having me. For those listening, for those officers that are on the front lines, keep fighting the good fight. For those that are in the command and leadership ranks, just keep thinking forward, think systems thinking, use the knowledge and the information and the research that's available in your profession, and help us move in this wonderful thing we call policing forward.
Awesome. Chief Vallejo, thank you for being with us. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to call you friend and mentor, and we will talk very soon. And we can find this podcast, y'all. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts, Rumble, and YouTube. It'll be out early next week, and we'll get it posted up on one of those channels. Thanks for following us, Chief. Thanks for being with us, and we'll talk soon. All right, sir?
Be well.
Again, just want to say thank you to Chief Vallejo for him carving out time, taking out time of his busy schedule. I know he's got a lot going on. Just thank you again, Chief, for being with us and being here. What a powerful conversation. I believe this conversation could have an impact on our leadership. We started today remembering the hard truths of servant leadership. Courage when it's unpopular, honesty that forgets trust, charity that puts people first, and justice that's fair but firm, and prudence that turns good intentions into lasting results. And Chief Vallejo didn't just talk about those virtues, he's living them and walking them out in Topeka, Kansas. And what a blessing to those officers in that community for that. From the restructuring that he did at APD, made any changes as he was my commander in Adams sector that are having lasting effects today, to modernizing and bringing Topeka up there into the future. There was the PAC and all the things that he's doing there, the data and problem-oriented policing, the focus that he has on problems. and he's refusing to hide behind stats, but he's taking that leadership role. He's shown what real leadership look like. It's not about commanding from a desk, and he said that multiple times. It's about leading people. It's about serving on the streets and getting your troops to buy in, listening to stories from the streets, finding those root problems, and then addressing them, which I can't wait to have Tamara Harold on in a couple weeks, because she's going to talk about place network investigations, as she's the one that came up with the idea about how to disrupt criminal networks. So talking to her is going to be absolutely amazing. Measuring success by safer families and safer communities is really what we're looking at. This is how we rebuild trust in the badge that we have lost over the years. We've heard how problem-oriented policing isn't a program. Folks, it's a mindset. It truly is a mindset. And I think once we understand that the culture has to change and we have to move from programs and catchphrases to mindset, then I believe that's when change is really going to happen. And I believe we're on the precipice of that change now. Scan the real issues and analyze with honesty and using data to make your response absolutely successful. This is the approach, and it's grounded in timeless virtues. It produces results. When you actually take time to do this, you will see crimes trend down. It's amazing. I said it during the interview. If we focus just on top offenders but not building community, we have to do both. We have to have arrests. We have to put people in jail. We have to enforce the laws, but we also have to build that community engagement side, bringing people together and giving them a voice and bringing them into the process. Now, to every listener wearing the uniform, or if you're a family member supporting those who do, this is a standard that we want to set forth. This is a standard for the future. This is 21st century policing. This is what it looks like. You lead with service, right? You lead with service. I want to say that again. So critically important. And we want to always tell the stories to remind us of why we do this job. And I think Chief Vallejo really laid that out at the very end there when he said, hey, remember the why. And that's to all my folks listening. If you're ever getting down or wondering why you should keep going, or if you should keep going, ask yourself, why? Why do I do this job? And if you can answer that in the positive, think you're headed in the right direction. You need to have courage, be transparent, make sure you're investing in your people, being just, and focus your resources, being harm focused, as Dr. Jerry Ratcliffe would say, and being prudent to build these systems. And these systems, once built, just like you heard Chief Vallejo say, will outlast any chief. You get it into policy, you get it into culture, and it doesn't matter who comes or goes, it's already being established there. And that's the greatest legacy any leader could have. And Chief Vallejo should be your example, the example to us all that we should chase and seek to be. Topeka today is a better off for having hired him and brought him to their city. And there are so many lessons that we can learn coming out that go far beyond the state of Kansas or the state of Texas or the city of Austin. And if today's conversation really hit home with you, please share with your fellow officer, a supervisor, tell them about our podcast, let them know, hey, the Blue Line Project is where you can go to hear from leaders within the community and just cover all different kinds of topics, current events that we cover here. So please follow us on one of those. If you like what we're doing here, hit the like button, smack the bell on Rumble, whatever you need to do. Follow us on Apple or Spotify. We're there as well. Drop me a line on X at Gabe2448. Right? We want to bring problem-oriented policing and these things to the forefront, really highlight them. So I'm just really excited about what we have. We'll be back very soon. We'll be back next week again for another episode. I have some really great guests, including Tamara Harold coming, and some great topics. So I think you'll enjoy that. I really love being here. I love this show. I love being with you guys. I couldn't do it without you. I want you guys to remember to always be Blue Line strong. And I hope you've enjoyed the Blue Line Project. This is John Gabrielson with the Blue Line Project signing off. See you next week.